I am Cecilia Fajardo-Hill, a curator and art historian specialized in Latin American art. I am the chief curator of Abstraction in Action and the Space Collection. I was born in New Zealand to a Welsh mother and a Venezuelan father, and I am currently based in Southern California. I am going to respond now to certain questions such as what is my definition of abstraction, what are the reasons why contemporary abstraction may be relevant today, does abstraction have a meaningful place within the larger field of contemporary art, are there specific ideas or traits that can be described as characteristics or singular about contemporary abstraction in Latin America? Personally, I think of abstraction as a language of resistance, a way of communicating obliquely, subtly, and sometimes politically in art, without recurring to forms of realism. We live in a hyper-real world, oversaturated with biased information and images, and often relying on the literal and recognizable structures of reality that simply replicate the colonial and problematical nature of the world. To believe that representation is a certain form of grasping reality, such as war, is to pretend that the critical role of art might be more visible and less problematical from a recognizable relation to reality. And also, it presupposes the old fashioned idea that abstraction is intended to move away from reality, to empty itself from it. This is based on the conventional acceptance in the dichotomy between abstraction and representation, but there is really no opposition between the two. I can think of many ways of contextualizing abstraction today, which can illustrate how it may be both relevant and meaningful, and dispel the prejudice that describe abstraction as decorative, meaningless, and as a refusal to communicate. For example, we can talk about intercultural abstraction, incorporating other culture to the Western, such as in Manuel Antonio Pichillas, post-colonial abstraction, as in the work of Sergio Vega, political abstraction, as in the case of Adam Vallecillo, the ideological critique of modernity, as in the case of Emilio Chapela, feminist abstraction, as in the case of Maria Ángeles Soto Díaz, abstraction and gender, such as the case of Marila Scafati, abstraction and popular culture, such as Pia Camille, discarded abstraction in artists such as Danilo Dueñas. In Latin America, it may be said that abstraction today is a strategy of imaginative, critical, and poetic intervention in social, political, cultural, aesthetic, and historical issues. Sometimes it is an urgent form of participation through forms of abstraction that are embedded in the daily fabric of life itself, whereas through the appropriation of popular and mass culture, or the direct undertaking of social, cultural, and conceptual or ideological issues. It be said often that abstraction may be irrelevant today in Latin America because it's too closely related to ideas of modernism, which we perceive as utopian and nostalgic. Nevertheless, despite this canonical idea of abstraction related to modernity in Latin America between the 1940s and 80s, let's say, related to artists such as Madi artists, neo-concrete artists from Brazil, such as Helvetica, Ligia Clark, the kinetic artists, such as Jesus Soto and Cruz Diaz. But for me, post-90s abstraction that is not purely formulistic is a different language which continually renews the possibilities of the abstract. What I have observed is that the hundreds of artists working with abstraction vocabularies today in Latin America are not grounded on modernist nostalgia, and the context of production is very different. Their abstraction is meaningful, informed by ideas, often political, and immersed in daily existence. I would like to read briefly a few artworks under some of the ideas that I mentioned before, such as intercultural abstraction, for an artist such as Manuel Antonio Pichillas, that was born in Guatemala, and works such as Nudo Típico, or Abuelos, or his contemporary glyphs, which deal with traditional ideas of Maya, Fajardo-Hill, going back to pre-Hispanic time into contemporary traditions of textiles that have all invested with a lot of symbolic values that normally do not belong to the contemporary art ideas of abstraction, and therefore that end up by being this kind of conjunction of both Maya and Western ideas of art in a very kind of decolonial way. Another subject that is very interesting is gender and abstraction and gender and feminism. For example, Mariela Scafati's painting Pink from 2015 or her recent bondage paintings. They are an investigation into gender and also on the queer. And the wonderful thing about this piece is that they invest with the human quality, the art pieces, creating a very strong connection between the abstract and the idea of the body and who we are as human beings. Another artist that is relevant in thinking about this subject is Maria Angeles Soto Diaz and the installation Pink Elephant in the Room, which is a site-specific installation that is inserted into the white cube the discussion of gender and racial inequality in the art world, which is hardly discussed and especially not related to abstraction. It is interesting to think of abstraction in relation to popular culture and the everyday, such as in the case of the two works we have here, Ricardo Rendon to the right and Felipe Mujica to the left. Ricardo Rendon's work is informed by his interest in traditional trades and materials, which are for the artist places of creative learning. In his work, he materializes the beauty of basic materials of construction such as sandpaper, copper pipes, industrial felt, wood, as well as the labor associated with this. To the right-hand side, we have Felipe Mujica. His curtain from 2013 is a work that aims to draw and occupy the space, as also the curtains that function as a space organizer, as temporary walls that canalize the public circulation and perception of space, as well as a perception of other possible artworks in space. This curtain is on the one hand a reference to the home as a curtain, and on the other hand a reference to modernist ideas and art in Latin America. Thinking about critical readings of modernism from abstraction is Clarissa Tossin's Brazilian by Foot, which presents the footpaths made by pedestrians within the monumental axis, a modernist urban structure in the city of Brasilia, consisting of 6-lane roads with no traffic lights or sidewalk. There is an evident and strong contrast between the complex network of love paths made by the people and the modern urban structure that excluded them in the first place, thus talking in critical ways about the utopian characteristics of modernism, particularly in Brazil. For example, thinking of critical approaches to modernity and modernism in Latin American abstraction and Mauricio, a piece such as Pantones that he did in Iquitos. These are plastic from the motorcycle taxis. Is an incredible way of thinking of the resourcefulness and this kind of failure of modernity. It's a very interesting example of how we may think of an idea of a decolonial or post-colonial abstraction superpose reality with the idea of utopia in the past.
My question is, can abstraction be conceptual or political?
Abstraction is said to be fundamentally an aesthetic investigation. Nevertheless, I would like to argue instead that it is often conceptual and political, as its formal solutions and materials are articulated entirely around concepts and ideas, such as in the case of Sandra Gamarra's series Econ Joseph Albert's Modernist to examine subtly how the Peruvian landscape is being destroyed through mining, or Emilio Chapela, Taco Bell piece, and his corporate logo series that become a form of ironical and ideological deconstruction of the global market, or Alexander Apostle's recent Color is My Business, 2012-16, where chromatic experiments reflect the political game that took place in Venezuela in the 1960s, reflecting in the demise of modernist dream through political corruption, or Nicolas Paris Control de Massa from 2012, a piece involving baking and sharing bread, making art interactive and also blurring the boundaries of art, public and the private space outside the art arena. As a gesture, it is also political by making reference to anarchists that fought the system during the dictatorship in Argentina by making bread. Most abstraction for me is definable as meaningful abstraction, such as in the case of Elena Damiani's Marcello number 3. My question to the next participant is, what is your personal relationship with abstraction as a language of contemporary art?